We're still listening to the rest of the prosecution's closing arguments in Phoenix. For the past hour and a half, Treena Kay has been laying out how the defendant was involved in the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Daybell's brother, Alex Cox, told police he was defending himself when he shot Vallow in July of 2019 after Vallow attacked him with a bat. Prosecutors say that Daybell and Cox believed that Vallow had become possessed by a dark spirit and that it was their mission to rid the world of him. These extreme religious views came from the teachings of Chad Daybell, who would later become Lori's fifth husband, and she married him just 4 months after the death of Charles Vallow. Closing arguments still underway. You haven't missed any of them. We want to take you back inside the courtroom where the prosecutor is delivering the final appeal to jurors.
When we have Christina telling us about Alex Cox saying that he wanted to kill Charles, Lori having no reaction to that, and instead talking about drugging Charles. Did you hear Alex making some comments?
Yes.
And you told us that they made you uncomfortable. What were these comments?
He stated he wished that he could just kill Charles.
Okay. Was Lori around when he's saying this?
Yes, one of the times.
Okay. So he said it more than once?
Yes.
Can you describe first part of his demeanor when he's saying this about wanting to just kill Charles?
It was jocular, just as I recall, he was standing up and just talking about it pretty loudly.
And you said one of the times that he said this, it was around Lori.
Yes.
Did she react in any way to hearing her brother say that he wished he could just kill her husband?
Not that I recall.
By July 9th, or when we start having this planning that we're talking about, we know that Lori Vallow is living in a house paid for by Charles Vallow. We know from even her statements to Detective Enclan that she doesn't like Charles, is what she says, but Charles won't file for a divorce. We know from her words and text messages that she wants to be with Chad Daybell, but Charles is her cash cow. She hasn't worked. He pays rent, car, cell phones, her travel. And so, as far back as June 9th, we're already hearing that Alex and Lori would like to not just get rid of Charles, but kill him. But if you think that June 9th wasn't the beginning of this planning, this idea, this concept that Lori and her brother have of getting rid of Charles, this evil, dark, possessed person, that we know on the 9th that there is definitely a plan by this defendant. And we see that through those text messages with Melanie, with Summer, with Alex, where she speaks of the mission, where she talks about telling Melanie, you can't leave. You got to pretend to be sick and stay here and keep track of Brandon so he doesn't come help Charles. He can't be in the picture. We need to stay here to defend ourselves from an intervention. The 10th. Again, we have Melanie, who is talking to her and saying that she wants to just go to this wedding. And what does Lori tell her? No, you have to stay here for the mission. The mission of stopping an intervention? No. As we continue through the 9th, we see Lori getting everyone lined up to help her. Alex, where he again is told that he will be like Nephi, just like her. Now Lori tells him it's an intervention. Everyone knows. Adam told you what's an intervention? It's talking to someone. It's common language. But that's not what the defendant wants to happen. She doesn't want Charles to divorce her and lose his money. She doesn't want this intervention to happen where she loses her temple recommend. What she wants is to be like Nephi and get rid of her husband.
Well, Nephi was a prophet in the Book of Mormon. It's the first chapter. He was a prophet, very humble and faithful servant of the Lord. Ironically enough, his brothers tried to kill him at one point. But he actually ended up going to Jerusalem to get these plates back, and he was run off, came back, and then went back again because the Lord asked him to. And when he did, the King Laban, who was actually a wicked king, was laying on the ground drunk in front of him, and Nephi was told to kill Laban.
Who was he told by?
The spirit, or God.
So God was using a Holy Spirit to tell him to kill Laban, and
Yes.
did he?
Yes, he did.
Was that something he anguished over?
Yes.
But ultimately, it was a justified killing.
Yes.
You heard from Detective Duncan that everyone he spoke with gave this same story. And again, the defendant questioned others about this story. But what we've heard is, from Detective Duncan and from Adam, that Nephi is this justified killing. When we think about her religious beliefs and what she's been telling people about not needing to repent, about telling people who is dark and evil, a zombie or a Z, that she is above the priesthood, it makes sense that she feels justified in determining who should live or die, just as she told her brother on the 9th. And we know that, in fact, we're talking about a justified killing because Alex brought a gun over. He didn't bring the Book of Mormon to talk to Charles about something. He didn't bring a friend to try to record Charles saying something. He brought a gun with him. And then he waited there for his sister's husband to come into the house so he could kill him. What we see is a very planned out, premeditated murder. But let's talk about some additional premeditation. Again, as we're looking at Summer, we see on the 10th that Lori is having her sister update her on where Adam and Zach are staying, so she knows they're not with Charles. They're not coming over. They're not going to be interfering with their justified killing. And there's that 12-minute time where the defendant desperately wanted to rewrite the timeline as they told the police that day. This just happened. It was very quick, but it wasn't. It was 12 minutes. Charles arrives at 7:37 and Lori leaves at 7:49. During this time is when that plan, that premeditated murder occurred. So let's talk about that as well. The evidence at the scene, the physical evidence, supports this premeditated murder. Alex fired 2 shots. One of them went through Charles' center mast. exited out his back and went into the floorboard. The second one, Charles was on the floor, on his back, bleeding out, still able to move, and we know that because he had blood on his left hand, and he was executed as he lay there on the ground. In that time, when we talk about premeditation and reflection, as Adam had to move his hand down, reposition the gun, and discharge and pull the trigger one more time, that is premeditated first-degree murder, no matter what you believe before that. Again, when we talk about that physical evidence, we saw that the location of that bullet defect in the ground matched right under Charles's left shoulder. And we heard from Dr. Baumgartner. Dr. Baumgartner told you that this was a classic shored wound. And no matter how many questions could be asked about him of maybe a bamboo shirt might stop a bullet in one location but not in another, or how many matrix-like hypotheticals where maybe Charles bounced back up and then on his way down, the bullet slowed down through him and waited till he hit the ground again before it exited. Dr. Baumgartner told you, no, those hypotheticals, those issues did not make sense. He's never seen a T-shirt stop a bullet in one location or at all. And we know Charles didn't bounce because we know he had no injuries to the back of his head. This also tells us a little bit about the shooting itself. When Charles was shot that first time through center mast, he did not fall straight back and land onto the ground, laying there on his back. If he had, he would have had bruising, abrasions on the back of his head when he hit the ground. He didn't have anything on the back of his head. Where did he have abrasions? On his knees. When he fell to the ground after being shot, do we know how long it took him to roll over, to fall onto his back, before he was then shot a second time because he's still alive? You heard it could take up to 2 minutes for Charles to have died, and that he could have spoke and moved during that time period. What we do know is that he eventually ended up on his back. And while he was on his back is when he was shot the second time by Alex. This defendant and her brother in that house waiting and making sure that Charles was dead, murdered, executed. Words, actions, motive, and physical evidence all tell you what happened that morning. So let's talk about conspiracy. And I know there are a lot of layers here, and I'm just building them up for you. You're told in your jury instructions that conspiracy requires proof. 1, the defendant agreed with one or more persons that one of them or another would engage in certain conduct. So again, we look to Lori Vallow's words. What she had been talking about for months, Charles being possessed, being dark, wanting to kill him, the discussion on June 9th, poisoning him or drugging him previously. And then when we got to July 9th, it is all coming to a head. We will be like Nephi. Her actions, having Charles come to the house.
We're going to step aside for a very short break. When we return, the state compares the story of the justified killing of Daybell and the shooting death of her husband, a non-justified killing. Stay tuned.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Lori Daybell delivers her closing argument in the cult mom murder conspiracy trial. We're live with every development as deliberations get underway.
Closing Arguments, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
You told police you shot him twice in the head.
I could have killed everybody in that building, and I didn't.
You think you should get some kind of credit for not killing people?
Interview with a Killer. New episode, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
Welcome back. Two things before we head back to court in Arizona versus Lori Daybell. The first is to let you know the clock for the deliberations by the jury is up. They've been deliberating about 5 minutes now. Of course, we've been bringing you the closing arguments in their entirety, which is why they are deliberating. We're still bringing those to you. Second thing is, of course, before we go back in, I'd like to bring in former Deputy Public Defender of LA County, Philip Dubé. Philip, always great to be on with you. Let me start with this. I thought it was very interesting how the state has meticulously detailed the words, actions, motive, and physical actions to say murder, and then starts to get into the conspiracy part. And so she says, for instance, 12 minutes in that house Lori was with Charles, and number two, there were 2 shots. The second when Charles Vallow was on his back. This was premeditated murder.
Yeah, exactly. And that is one of the difficulties with circumstantial cases, and you don't have an eyewitness, particularly where everybody is dead, as in this particular case. She has to meticulously draw the jury a picture and connect the dots from the very beginning. If you just try to give a straight summation by arguing to the jury what the evidence has shown, it might just go right over their heads. But the way she has point by point painted this picture of a conspiracy to kill, I have a feeling that this jury is afraid of her, frankly. That initial image of her with her pretty blonde tresses and her push-up bra coming out to the lectern with her soft damsel voice now has gone to being this evil, possessed woman inhabited by dark spirits, where the jury wouldn't put anything past her. And I think it was a wise decision for her not to testify, because given the pulse of this judge, the priors out of Idaho involving Tammy and the kids would have absolutely come in, and the jury would have no problem extrapolating from this idea that if you've been convicted of killing your own children, you certainly would have no compunction in killing a husband that you're on the outs with. So she's putting it together real nice, showing that she is trying to go from the telestial to the celestial kingdom and would off anybody or anything that gets in her way.
I agree with the state's closing in this case, but I have to tell you this. Here's what I foresee with Lori, and that is, as a pro se defendant, getting up there to making a closing argument, I think she's going to be inclined to want to say, Philip, what she wants the jury to know, but she didn't testify. It's not evidence. I think that could be a challenge for any pro se defendant to understand what closing is about and not accidentally start saying things that's not allowed.
Oh, and I'm telling you, that's inevitable. And you know there's going to be objections coming from the prosecution. They're going to get sustained by the court, because she's going to try to weave in facts that are just simply not in evidence. And what the court will do to cure it is just say, look, what is said by a pro per and by counsel is not evidence. You're to rely strictly on the evidence that came from the witness stand and through exhibits, and not through the representations of the litigants. I mean, that's just a standard sort of curative verbal instruction. It's certainly not enough to hold her in contempt, particularly a pro per, when they truly don't know the rules. But I think it's pretty clear to this jury, at least in the opening anyway, that they were going to give a punter a chance, if you will. But as that evidence started to unfold and painted the picture really of a dark, evil, ghastly woman, I'm telling you, the last thing she wants to do is to try to weave in inadmissible facts, because she's already behind the 8 ball with this jury. I'll be shocked if they're out more than 2 hours.
And I feel like in addition to that, her lack of remorse when she's kind of giggling, oh, sorry, neighbors, after she knows he's been shot and is likely dead in the house. I just think some of those little pieces also are going to speak to the jury, but we'll have to wait and see. Philip, stand by. We want to go back into court for the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell, where we are listening to closing arguments for the state. Let's go back in.
Criminal objective. So, just because you don't have someone who says, I heard them say, we shall conspire, you can infer that from the conduct. The conduct of what happened on the 9th, the conduct of what happened on the 10th, and the conduct of what happened on the 11th. All infer to you a conspiracy of Alex coming over with his gun to shoot and kill Charles. As we again look at this and this conspiracy again, we're looking at the same words and actions. March, Charles is no longer there. There's just an evil spirit in his body. June, Charles is still possessed, and now Alex is saying he wants to kill him. Lori is fine with this, and she says she's drugging him or had been drugging him. And then 2 weeks before, all of a sudden, Charles knows Lori's been having this affair. Lori's words, actions, motive, and the physical evidence. Conspiracy again, we see that Lori and Alex know exactly when Charles is showing up. Alex doesn't go to the door, according to Lori, and confront Charles or tell him, we'll send JJ out and you can leave with him. The world is so difficult. How hard would that be? Bring JJ right to the door and let him leave with his dad. No, you aren't going to shoot him outside. You want to make it look like self-defense inside. As you go through this and we think about what's going on, the defendant doesn't even care. She wants her husband killed so bad that she's willing to let her brother bring over a loaded gun in an unlocked gun case in a house with a 7-year-old autistic child. That's fine. When the defendant was questioning Detective Enclan, she was talking about how hot it was outside. JJ's out in the car. But she has no problem with an unlocked gun in the house with the kid, and she's worried about her child out in the car? She's not. We know that because she's the reason Charles doesn't go back out into the car and leave. She keeps him there in the house. She is why JJ's out in the car alone. She has to keep him there until Alex comes out and can shoot and kill him. When we talk about that premeditation, obviously we're talking about that message. We know from the 9th on, they are premeditated, they are conspiring, and it's all heading to July 11th. We look at the timing of this, and this is actions and non-actions. Charles is in the house for 12 minutes. After those 12 minutes, they wait 47 more minutes before they call 911. Why? To stage the scene. No CPR is performed. They wait for Charles to be dead, and then they talk during this time period. They talk. They could call 911, but nope.
Ms. Kay is really leaning into setting this scene for the jury, explaining, listen, Lori keeps him, Charles Vallow, in that house until Alex can come out and shoot him, and then they stage the scene. A really great closing by the state. Let us know what you think this jury might do. We're going to take a break. When we come back, of course, we'll bring you more closings from the state, but also you're going to hear from Lori Daybell.
I'm Kelly Craft in Phoenix, Arizona, covering the cult mom conspiracy trial. You're watching Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Ashley Wilcott in for Michael Ayala. Now let's turn back to Arizona for closing arguments in the cult mom conspiracy trial for Lori Daybell. She's accused of conspiring with her brother, Alex Cox, to murder her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Vallow was shot and killed in July of 2019, and Cox claimed he shot him in self-defense. By the time a new investigation indicated murder, Cox had died 5 months after the shooting, and Daybell is the only one left standing facing charges in the death of Charles Vallow. Daybell chose to represent herself in this trial and decided not to call witnesses or put up any evidence in her defense. She faces another life sentence if she is convicted in this trial. Of course, she's currently serving another life sentence for the murders of her 2 young children in Idaho. Now the jury is hearing the rest of the state's closing arguments.
She's just telling a story here, like what happened, almost chuckling about it.
Okay. So this morning he comes back in and...
He comes back in, I wouldn't give him his phone. He was screaming at me to give him his phone. He was very worried about whatever was on his text that he did not want me to see. And so I was just holding it there and he was screaming at me. And I was kind of walking around the house with it so he couldn't get it. He's like reaching for it and stuff like that.
So again, JJ's in the car, Tylee's not out, Alex isn't out, and she is making sure that he doesn't leave. She's walking around the house, holding his phone, refusing to give it to him, making sure her autistic child is sitting out in the car even longer so that she can ensure that exactly what they've been planning happens, that Alex has time to come out with the gun that he brought over and shoot and kill Charles. This defendant is the only reason why Charles didn't leave with JJ. This defendant is the one who provoked Charles by taking his phone and refusing to get it back. This defendant is the one who ensured that Charles was inside without JJ so Alex could shoot him. And this defendant is the person who set up Charles so that her brother, Alex, could shoot him. So let's talk about staging the scene. We know, obviously, from the first responders that when they arrived, no CPR was given. You heard from Officer Wierzbecki that when he felt Charles's neck, he thought he was dead already, but they still let the first responders in because they've been told CPR had been given. And what do we know? That they arrived within a few minutes. No one had ever tried to save Charles. No blood had been pushed out of him from CPR, whether strong or light. He had been dead for quite a while. His skin was mottled when they started cutting open his shirt and looking to the back, and lividity, the blood pooling, was occurring already. So they kind of knew something was off with that timeline. So what about the scene itself? The bat. It is placed to the right of Charles to look like he was using it. He got shot and it went flying behind him. Well, obviously we've heard from Kay, Charles's sister, that he was left-handed. We know from the blood evidence on his hand he was left-handed. There's no damage to that mirror. There's no damage to the drywall. There's no damage anywhere, like this bat is being swung around in this horrific fight that's going on of grappling. The injury to Alex Cox's head, you heard it was a small 1-inch cut that he was using a paper towel to pat, and at times, as you watch that Exhibit 1, rubbing it, making sure it stays bleeding. There is no blood at the scene from this giant grappling thing going on that Lori Vallow wanted them to believe. His head is bleeding and they're grappling around and he's being beat with this bat, and yet not one drop of blood on the floor. Not one drop of blood going down the hallway when he put that gun away. Not one drop of blood on the gun itself. And then the shoes, left by the door to look like Lori Vallow had run out in fear after this horrific incident that they planned. But what we know from the Walgreens video is that she did enter the store with shoes. something on her feet. So we're going to go through. We know Charles, again, left-handed, killed with your brother.
Yeah.
What position did your brother play?
He was a pitcher. He was very, very good. He was a left-handed pitcher, and they're very hard to hit against.
Okay. Did he bat right or left-handed?
He was left-handed.
Did he do everything left-handed?
Yes.
Left-handed? So we know that Charles batted left-handed, not right-handed. And what we know is Lori Vallow had a story about how Charles was using that bat. And it becomes very important as well when we're talking about the staging of the scene. This is Exhibit 193.
Yeah, she was outside.
We'll have more closings in the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell. And coming up next, we review the 3 things we've learned today in the cases we've been covering from coast to coast here at Court TV.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, Lori Daybell delivers her closing argument in the cult mom murder conspiracy trial. We're live with every development as deliberations get underway.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
You feel that? The NWSL is on ION. It's game time.
Showing off a little skill now.
The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long. Find ION wherever you watch.
ION.
It's on.
We are following closing arguments in the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell. Let's get back inside the courtroom now. The jury is seeing the state replay snippets of Lori's police interview.
Like backwards.
Like he was swinging it backwards? He would have done like
he would have swung it backwards at me, not frontwards.
Okay.
So Lori Vallow tells Detective Enclan that Charles is swinging the bat backwards. Now, if the bat was like this when he was shot, the arm would have been shot. Covers his center mass. So we know he wasn't here. So if he's out here, where would the bat go? Down? Out? Somewhere that way to his left. It would not end up thrown up above him. And if it wasn't there again, Charles would have been shot through the arm. Obviously, Alex forgot that Charles was left-handed. So when he placed that, like he was coming at him with a bat, their stories didn't quite match up with the evidence. So if we rely on Lori's story of how Charles was holding the bat, then there's zero way that that bat would end up where it ended up. And again, we know he's left-handed from not only Kay, but his own admissions of that blood on his hand. So we see the scene is staged, this bat that is so necessary to try to ensure this justified killing is legally justified and not just spiritually justified. When we talk about the scene as well, and you're looking at where Charles was, at least when that second shot went through him, you can see in the photograph to the right, the shot to Charles's chest, right between his nipples, and the shot to Charles's abdomen down lower. We know that that first shot through his chest, that Charles would have been facing a little more towards the open area there where we see the hallway and the kitchen. We know that because there was the bullet trajectory Detective Treena told you about that entered that far east wall. We know there was stippling, and so the defendant would have been, well, her brother would have been within 2 to 4 feet of the muzzle of that gun within Charles, 2 to 4 feet. We know from the lack of that injury to the back of his head that he didn't fall straight back. We know from the blood on his hand that he was still alive after he was shot. And we know the lack of stippling for that shot to his abdomen and that trajectory And even the defendant's own statements that she saw her brother at Charles's feet, that he would have stood there at Charles's feet when he fired that second shot as he was laying on the floor. You have the bat, Exhibit 249. You can look at the edge of it. You see the photograph of the edge of it. There is no blood and no damage to this bat. Regardless of how many times the defendant was hoping that blood was invisible, we have all cut ourselves and seen that blood is red. And there was no blood on this bat. There is no blood on this bat. There is no damage to this bat. So you have a semi-professional baseball player who has a bat in his hand and he sees someone with a gun and he doesn't beat him with it, take his head off with it, knock him unconscious with it. Instead, all we see on this bat is 0 damage and 2 partial prints. No prints of a body or smushed skin on it. Someone that's sweating from a fight that's left a large arm print on it or anything else. Nope, just 2 partial little prints on it. When you think about what is there and what isn't there, does the evidence of this bat fit in at all? It doesn't. We look at Charles's watch. No damage to it. No scratches to it. No dings to it as he's grappling on the floor like Lori wants you to believe. We know that at some point, Charles is standing and shot, and we know that final shot, he's on the ground. We know he fell to his knees at some point. And when you look at that physical evidence and the lack of damage or anything on that bat, again, what makes sense is that Charles fell to his knees after that first shot. We know that there is 12 minutes where the defendant and her brother are still together there so that Alex can get this 1-inch cut to the back of his head that's barely bleeding, that he uses a paper towel to dab at and rub. The shoes that the defendant ran out of on her way out. You have the exhibit. You can see black straps across her toes as she enters and exits the Walgreens. And then you see that she's wearing the flip-flops when she comes back to the scene. What do we know? That the police did not search Charles's rental car.
Philip Dubé, former Deputy Public Defender of LA County, still with us. 2 things I want to talk to you about. First of all, I think it's very smart for the prosecution to use these snippets of testimony of Lori talking to the police throughout the closing argument. I think it really keeps that jury engaged.
Of course it does, because the jury's not going to remember everything that came from the stand, everything that was played. And that's the purpose of closing argument, is to collate all the relevant points and just play it, show it, and argue it to the jury. And now they get a complete picture. It's almost like this damaging, colorful mosaic of a conspiracy to kill. You don't see it with just 1 tile in blue or 2 tiles in yellow and blue. You have to get all the tiles on that canvas for it to all come together and make sense. And I got to tell you, she's doing a magnificent job. Now, I will say this, to be fair to Lori, here I go. There has to be evidence that Alex was in on a conspiracy. It's one thing that Lori wanted him dead. She wanted to move on. She wanted to be one of the surviving 144,000 to be in the celestial kingdom. But if Alex was not part of that agreement, Lori cannot be convicted of conspiracy to kill. What are you left with? Well, you'd have to get her on the actual murder itself. The problem with that is Alex did the killing. What's left? you would have to convict her of being an aider and abettor to the murder, and there would have to be something that she did to help facilitate, advance, and further it. And I don't think it's there yet. The other final point I'm going to make too is that when you look at the Book of Mormon and you study Nephi, what's fascinating is Nephi did not meet a violent demise himself. Instead, he died of natural causes after a long, fulfilling life. So I think the premise that the prosecution is putting forth, that she was following the tenets of Nephi, really doesn't make sense when you look at the literal language of those tenets and of those writings. So the problem is, unless Lori puts something on like that in evidence, the jury really has no roadmap to look at her defense with a critical eye.
And I think it just muddies the waters myself, so I didn't love that piece of it. But let me also ask you this. All the viewers asked this question. Do you think, Philip, that any of the people on this jury know that she's been convicted of murder of her 2 children, serving life sentences? And even if they know, they can still be fair and impartial if they answer that way. Or do you think they have no knowledge of it whatsoever? We know it was not evidence in this case.
I think it's a hybrid. I think you have some jurors who frankly have never even heard of Lori Vallow, never even heard of Chad Vallow. We have, because we are the true crime sort of aficionados, and we are living in full immersion, if you will, every day of our lives, because that's our gig. But jurors who lead their lives as postal workers, DMV workers, driving buses, delivering the mail, they don't necessarily fixate or focus on this stuff. Now, of course, there are going to be people who heard of her. But the ultimate test during voir dire is, have those prospective jurors formed an ultimate opinion either way? If they haven't formed an ultimate opinion, then it means that they necessarily can be fair. And hopefully they'll keep their word, and we'll hear what Lori has to say and see if she picked the right jury. Otherwise, I can see them coming back in less than 2 hours.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. They are deliberating right now. We've been bringing closings in their entirety. Thank you so much, Philip Dubé, for joining us this hour. You're going to be sticking around for the next hour. Now, here are 3 things we've learned this Monday. First, the man who fatally shot 23 people at an El Paso Walmart pled guilty to murder today, nearly 6 years after the fact. Patrick Crucius carried out the racist attack targeting Hispanic shoppers in 2019. Prosecutors offered him a plea of pleading guilty to capital murder in exchange for not receiving the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, and he's already been sentenced to 90 consecutive life sentences by a federal judge. Second, a judge has ruled that Harvey Weinstein can stay in a hospital during his rape retrial in New York. Last week, his lawyers asked the judge to allow him to spend his nights at a hospital instead of jail for the duration of the trial, citing his many health issues. This ruling comes as jury selection in his trial continued today for a 4th day. And third, attorneys for Dwayne Davis, also known as Keefe D, have filed a motion for a new trial in his jail altercation case due to juror misconduct. Earlier this month, the jury found Davis guilty of battery by a prisoner and challenging to fight. But it has come to light that one of the jurors engaged in improper communications about the case during the lunch recess, violating the court's direct instructions. Davis is also set to stand trial next year for murder in connection with the 1996 death of rapper Tupac Shakur. Coming up, we take you back to Arizona for a special hour of coverage on the cult mom conspiracy trial for Lori Daybell. Court TV legal correspondent Kelly Craft will be taking over live from the courthouse. Stay with us on Court TV, your original true crime obsession.
Welcome back to our special coverage of the cult mom conspiracy trial of Lori Daybell. I'm Cody Thomas. We're watching closing arguments as Lori Daybell acts as her own attorney in hopes of clearing her name in this trial. The convicted child killer is accused of conspiring to murder her 4th husband just months before she murdered her 2 kids. Prosecutors say Daybell and her brother Alex Cox have been planning the death of Charles Vallow for weeks before instigating the fight that broke out on the morning of July 11th, 2019, and ultimately ended in Vallow being shot to death. Let's get you into the courtroom. The jury is listening to the state deliver closing arguments about why the killing of Charles Vallow was not justified.
Credibility. You are given a credibility instruction and you use it for everyone, including the defendant. You're told that you really evaluate people the same way. You're looking for any inconsistencies in their stories, any reasons why they may have a motive or bias to lie, any prejudice they may have, and then you look at everything in light of reason, common sense, and experience. When you think of the testimony of the people who've come here and talked to you, Christina Atwood, Serena Sharp, Nancy Jo Hancock, Adam Cox, Dr. Bumgardner, the detectives, Robin Smith Scott, Mark Sari, what benefit do these people have in being untruthful to you? They have body cameras, they have prior documents, and they have memories of what this defendant said. But the credibility of Lori Vallow is something you do need to consider. And you start with her demeanor that day, where she wasn't worried about anything when she arrived. Her brother has allegedly been hit in the head with a bat by her husband, who plays semi-pro ball. She doesn't even worry about him. She knows he's not hurt. He's fine. And why does she know that? Because that was staged. When she's there and we see her on body cam arriving, she's just nonchalant and calm. And I know the defendant wanted to make sure that it was clear that everyone else was calm, but no one else had just allegedly seen their husband get shot and killed by their brother. When you were looking at the reasonableness of her testimony, you have to consider it in the light of reason, common sense, and experience. And the way that she was acting and reacting that day, as well as her own statements, do not fit the evidence, do not fit the physical evidence, and you will see her credibility throughout this whole case has been questionable. Her credibility with Social Security. What did we learn? That on July 11th, she tells Detective Enclan that she and Charles are separated. It's Exhibit 187. We are not living together. Charles rented her house. We're separated. But on August 12th, when she needs to make sure she gets some money, she tells Social Security, when they ask, are you living together at the time of death? Yes. You also learned that she was not truthful with Social Security when she got remarried. She did not tell them about that either. So we know she's been untruthful to Social Security twice. Why is that relevant? Because you're judging the credibility of Lori Vallow throughout all of this. Life insurance. We know that she said Charles was accidentally shot. We know that was not true. She wanted to make things seem like she had nothing to do with the murder. But we know that Alex Cox intentionally shot Charles. Whether or not she wants to claim it's self-defense or not, there was nothing accidental about shooting him twice. Then that second call to Banner Life Insurance, where she tells Robin Smith Scott a few different things to garner sympathy, and she asked her if she could do anything about the change in beneficiary.
I can't give too much information, but I can tell you that the beneficiary was changed in March of this year. Okay. Okay, I'm trying to figure out what he was doing since we have 5 kids and we've been married for 15 years. Oh, I'm sorry.
So Lori tells this woman, we have 5 kids, which if you want to count them all and admit that 3 of them are adults, then okay. Really, they have 1 kid in common. Tylee, you learned, was actually getting Social Security survivor benefits from her dad's death starting in 2018. Lori's son, Colby, isn't living with them. Charles' son's never lived with them. Why does she say these things? She can't help it. She just wants to just make herself seem better than she is. What about the credibility of her interview, even during the police interview? We've talked about a few things, but one of the things she told the detective.
That I didn't file anything or whatever. And then he filed something against me and said, I'm only going to get supervised visits because I'm crazy and blah, 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 you know, the story. And so I just didn't talk to him for like 30 days and let him take care of him and let him see what I've been doing.
So again, she can't even be honest and say 2 months. She's got to be like 30 days. I was kind enough to just leave my husband with my son for 30 days. What we know is that Rory Vallow was gone a total of 78 days, 58 while she's flying to Hawaii, going to Idaho and back with Chad. And who's taking care of JJ? Charles. And Kay is coming here regularly to help take care of JJ, to help run the business. And then eventually on March 28th, that's when Charles finally decides he hasn't been able to find Lori. He doesn't know where she is. He's going to move to Houston to be closer so his sister can help him more easily. And this is when Lori finally shows back up. So again, even the simplest thing of just trying to be honest about how long she's been gone, she has to minimize it and make herself seem better.
With your cross.
The shoes. If this will play. When she was questioning Detective Enclan, she was asking her if it was hot in July and if she would need shoes to go take her son to school. But of course, what we know is that we saw her with those shoes on as she went into Walgreens. So again, it's continued trying to garner sympathy and just being untruthful about whatever she feels like being untruthful about. And then we look at the credibility in that timeline, that body cam.
You know, now that you're not in Santana, this is your home.
Right,
Gotcha.
right.
Okay.
We just moved in.
Gotcha. How long have you guys lived here?
Sorry?
How long have you lived here?
Like 3 weeks.
Oh, geez. Yeah, okay.
That's why the neighbors don't know us.
Gotcha.
Like, hi, neighbor, sorry.
Are you working?
So here she is, 47 minutes after leaving the house, laughing and smiling with the detective about the fact that her husband is dead inside the house. And her brother is sitting on the curb, allegedly with this very serious injury from a baseball bat. When you look at that credibility of the defendant, you have to look at everything together and what fits, again, with the physical evidence and what doesn't. Finally, let's talk about the justification defenses. What we know is that Lori Vallow thought she was like Nephi, that she was justified in killing Charles. That her brother, who was supposed to be like her, was also justified in killing Charles. But Lori Vallow is not justified under Arizona law, nor is Alex. So let's go through the different justification defenses. First thing that you have to consider for every one of these, self-defense, defense of a third person, or crime prevention, is the non-justification for use of deadly physical force. You are told if a person is not justified in using or threatening physical force or deadly physical force against another in response to verbal provocation alone. So Charles yelling and screaming at her to give his phone back does not justify you shooting him. Or a person is not justified in using or threatening deadly physical force if the defendant or co-conspirator provoked the other's use or attempted use of unlawful physical force. So we know here Lori provoked Charles by taking his phone and refusing to give it back. So again, when we look at every one of these defenses, you'll see not only do they not apply, but None of them is the defendant entitled to. This is not self-defense. In self-defense, you're told that a person, a reasonable person, can use deadly physical force if they believed that deadly physical force was immediately necessary to protect against another's use or apparent attempted or threatened use of unlawful deadly physical force, and the person used or threatened no more deadly physical force than would have appeared necessary to a reasonable person in this situation. We know that Lori Vallow used Charles's phone to get him to come back inside, and she used his phone to keep him inside and give her brother time to come out and shoot and kill Charles. We know from the physical scene itself that Charles did not use a bat. We know from the physical evidence of Alex's 1-inch cut to his head and the lack of blood or concussion, the lack of damage to the mirrors, the walls, the location of the bat in relation to Charles, they all tell us that Charles did not use a bat. We know that Charles was a semi-professional baseball player. This would not have ended that way if he had had a bat. But even if you somehow think that he did have a bat and he was swinging it at Alex, the defendant, whoever, he still was not justified in shooting him when he was on the ground. It has to be immediately necessary to protect against another's use. When Charles is on the ground and he is shot that second time, there is no threat to anyone. And so that is not self-defense.
Counsel, I need to give my court reporter a break unless you think you'll be done in the next 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead.
When we look at the physical evidence, again, we know that Charles was on the ground, shot, and so this is not self-defense. And we know from the physical evidence at the scene, the projectile into the floorboard, this is not self-defense. Third party. You're told that a person is justified in using or threatening deadly physical force in defense of a third person, I presume here Lori Vallow. If a reasonable person in this situation would have believed that deadly physical force was necessary to protect against another's use, again, of unlawful deadly physical force against a third person, and they used only what was necessary.
All right, what I want to do right now is hand it off to my colleague, Kelly Craft, who is live there in Phoenix, Arizona. She was just able to get out of that courtroom after following these closing arguments very closely all day. Kelly, great to see you, my friend.
Hi there, Cody. Great to see you as well. You heard the judge there telling the prosecutor that he needed to give the jury a break if she only had maybe about 5 more minutes. She said that she did. She went a little bit longer than the 5 minutes, but then after she went, the jury got a break.